So here we go again. Last time we got the login form working, so I can log in as Alice1234. I can log out, and I'm going to make this this login form. I just want to make it easier to do the development by putting in into its initial state the username and password. So let's see. That makes it easier to test. Then I just log in and log out. If I mess up the password, then bad username or password. Now there's an issue with this. When we log in, and then we're going to add the Cliq me here, and let me do that. So we should have a like a Cliq me button, and so we have, and this is how I'm going to do it. This is our app, so we start at this point. So we want to add this Cliq me button here, and then show the number of times the logged in user has clicked the button. So we have our app component instantiated right there. And when that's rendered, then this piece of logic runs right there. So the what we render depends on whether we're logged in or not. Actually, there's a problem here because if we're logged in and we go and render this app component, if we like reload the web page, watch, I'm logged in here. I reload the web page, I get the login form, but I'm already logged in. So there's a problem here. This internal state here, the state of the app, it's now logged in as false, but actually on the server side, the session object is still there, and that session object still contains the the logged in username. So that's a problem. What we should do is a check when we load this app and mount this here, this component, we should check to see the login state. So we have some initialization to do for the application. We also, so what we'll do is implement the, what's it called? Component did mount. That's the, that'll be the event that happens when this app component is inserted into the web page. So it becomes available to the user. So in here, what we're going to do is initialize the application. And so we'll do something like call like an init script to get the data that we need to initialize the state of the application. And we want to know if the user's already logged in or not. That's one thing we need to know. And if the user's logged in, we want to know the number, we want to know the click count, the number of times the user clicked the button. So we're going to do that here. This is the response object, and that's a function call. Now just to make sure we don't forget to do this, we want to call bind on that so that we can use this inside the body of this callback function, and it will refer to this inside this callback function will refer to the object that component did mount was called on. All right. So we're going to call this init.php script, so we got to create that. And in this script, we're going to get the state of the web application. So let's take a look at that. So let me maybe copy this. Let me copy this login script and put it into this init script here. It'll be very similar. Start the session. You know, there's nothing coming in. The init doesn't have any incoming data. So we can take that out right off the bat. But what we want to know is if the user's logged in or not. So we're going to look at what's in the session object. We want to see if the username is defined in there. So let's suppose it's not defined, then they're not logged in. So if it's not the case, isSet, if isSet returns false for $session username, so that means we're not logged in. So what we can do there is send a response, which can be, we're going to return an empty response. Let me take a look at, last time I modified this Ajax a little bit to handle the case that there's an empty response. See, if we get the response text and then we trim it to take off white space and we check its length, if the length is 0, that means there's no characters coming in. So we don't want to break the calling code by not returning an object, so we'll return an empty object, or we could return null actually. I think we can return an empty object, that's all right. So we can simply exit here. Yeah, it looks like there's an issue there. We need another parenthesis. All right, so let's take this out. Let's hit the database. And we don't need to know the password. What we need to know is the Cliq count. It'll be a field called Cliq count. Select Cliq count from users where username equals username. And the username we'll get from the session, of course. So we gotta pull the username out. So this username is in the session object, so let's pull it out. This is username. And then we set it here, right there. Execute, and check the row count. Now, if the row count is 0, it means that the user logged in, and then the user's record was deleted. So that's that would be possible. It's possible. So what would we do in that case? I think what we would do is, let's just, we could log the user out, or we could just exit. Just exit. This is the weird case that the user record was deleted after login. When is that going to happen? So we don't want to be too overly concerned with that possibility. Now let's advance the row pointer forward and then pull out the first row. So we do that right here in line 21. And we're going to pull out the Cliq count. It will be Cliq count equals, and the row in the database is not case sensitive, so I'm going to use Cliq count like this. Did we do that in the database? Yeah, we have Cliq count right there. So here's the script for creating the table, the users table. Username, password, click count. Click count, we're going to start by initializing it to 0 everywhere. So we pull out the click count, and we're going to return that down here. So we'll return the response will be click count. Click count will be $, click count. Obviously, if we return a click count, it means that we've got a logged in user. And here we go. There we go. And we catch exceptions here. I think that's good for a init. And now, when we call init and we get this response, we'll check, if there's a click count, if response, well, we'll check for an error first. And if there's an error, then we'll do, in the console, we'll write that there's an error. Is that how I did it here? Or I think I used alert. So if the response.result equals an error, this is how I did it. Let's go ahead and do this. So let's that was result, response.result. If that equals the word error, then we want to alert the user. This is just for development. Actually, I wouldn't want to do an alert to the user with this error. You want to handle it differently. And so here we go. And then if it's not an error, else if response dot click count, if response dot click count exists, then what we're going to do, we'll have a click count here, an initial click count, which is initially set to 0, say. And logged in would be false. Actually, we're going to start, yeah, we'll leave it like that. So if we find a click count, then we need to set the state of this component accordingly. So we know they're logged in. That's a little bit redundant there, isn't it? So we could set the click count to null, to meaning that the user's not logged in. And we could do it like that. What do you think about that? We could just take that out and say the click count set to null means the user's not logged in. We'll try that. So we'll just put a note in there. So click count set to null means the user is not logged in. I do this a lot. For some reason, I don't get rid of the shift when I do that. All right, so here is, we're going to set the state click count. click count will be set to response dot click count. There it is right there. This dot state click count. All right, so that logs us in essentially. Otherwise, we're not logged in and the click count is null. So there's another issue here, and that is when we first, well, let's check this first. So when on login, we set the, when we log in, oh, look at this. We need to get the click count here when we log in. So each time we log in, we need to get the click count. So what are we going to do there? Right now we have the login function down here in the login form. You know, that's where we're logging in. And when we log in, we could get the click count instead of getting success here. We can get the click count. Why don't we do that? So the login here, instead of returning so when we successfully log in, we want to return the state of the application, which is simply the click count, and which implies that the user is in the, being not null would imply that the user is logged in. So I think what I want to do is modify that so that we're not looking for this result here. It's going to be similar to this Ajax function, which is the, you know, this init. If there is a click count, then we've got it here. Now this component will need, this is a little tricky here. It's an organization problem. We're going to make it two separate steps. We could do, you know, login, and then followed by the login, we can retrieve the click count. And then when the application initializes, we can check the login state. If we're already logged in, then we'll get the click count. So that's not sure how to do it. Let's see. I'm thinking here. So I like having the login function handled down here, this Ajax with the login form. I think that's nice. And when we log in, you know, we need to know the click count. So another way to do this, when we call init, basically init is just getting the click count. So we could do, basically we can do click count on this. This is the click count. We can call it click count. And, you know, if we get the click count, otherwise the state, we do nothing. The user's not logged in. I got to decide how to do this. So click count set to null means the user is not logged in. Well, let's go on that convention. So when we first initialize here, component did mount, we're going to check this. We're going to ask for our Cliq count. And if we get it, that means we're logged in. If we don't get it, then it means we're not logged in. So this is all about getting Cliq count. I don't know the best way to do it. Isn't that funny? So not funny, but there's a lot of trade-offs in terms of mainly it's about readability, but then there's how many times do you want to hit the server? Do you want to minimize that? So we could make this two separate functions. So we have checking now. Well, I think we're okay like this. So basically, we have Cliq count set to null here. And when we log in, what we want to do here is maybe we can pass up the Cliq count here. I made that mistake again. Let's think about doing it like that. And then the Cliq count is set to whatever is passed in here. And then when we log out, we set the Cliq count back to null. And if the Cliq count I'm going to specifically test for null. If the Cliq count is null, then I know we need to display the login form. Yeah, I'm getting happy now. I think this solution is all right. So if the Cliq count is null, we are not logged in. We'll display the login form. Otherwise, we'll display the logout button, and we'll also need to display the Cliq count and the click button. We'll need to add that later. So we've kind of, but now for this on login event, we have to pass up the Cliq count. So we're going to end up fixing this. This is login. This is login, and the response is if we have a failure, we'll do it like this. If the response is a failure, means it was the username and password, something is wrong there. And if it's a failure, then we're done. Otherwise, we're going to check to see if it's a result is success, and then there's a Cliq count. Or we could just return the Cliq count. So I guess we should check to see if it's, I think we can do it with the failure. Success, we'll do it like that. I'll just keep it the way it is. And then we'll do this props on login response dot Cliq count. So we'll pass it up like that. That's how we'll do it. If it's an error, if the result is an error, then we're going to do that alert there. All right. All right, that means in login, we're going to get, we want to select the password and the Cliq count. From users. And then down here, the session, the username is set in the session. The response is success, comma, Cliq count, arrow, $, Cliq count. And we need to pull that out. So it'll come out of this row here. So the Cliq count comes out of that row. There we go. So returning the Cliq count, the state of the application is returned along with this result being a success. And this is this is where we just get the Cliq count, but you know what, I might want to call it init again. I like that name. This is, it does more than just get the Cliq count. It checks to see if they're logged in or not. It doesn't really follow the pattern that we have here. The pattern here is we've got a result argument that we're returning. We could try to make it consistent. Let's do that, I guess. So the response would be, let's make it consistent. The response is you know, that we're logged in. All right, so that's the response. And up here, the user is not logged in. Response is not logged in. I think it's easier to read this. I think that's easier. And then we're sticking to kind of a similar pattern here where we have a result field in our responses instead of returning an empty object. And here, when we have an error, you know, our response has a result set to error with the message. When the response is set to logged in, then Cliq count is set to the Cliq count. You know, I think I'm sure that's easier to read. So we'll do it like that. So here is the, what is this? This is the login form. So the result we're checking for failure, bad username or password. If the result is a success, then we can pull out the Cliq count. If the result is an error, then we're going to display the error. And if we don't get a result field, then we say the response message has no result attribute. So it's the same, should be the same with this init script down here. And I'm going to change that to init. This is init. So down here, initialization. So if the result is an error, it will display the error. If the result is logged in, then we have a Cliq count in the response. Else, if the result is not logged in, then we're going to set the state Cliq count to null. There we go. Otherwise, response message has no result. So we're always requiring a result field in the response. All right. Well, we can check to see if it works. Let's make sure we're logged out. Oops. And I want to open up that JavaScript console. Response message has no result attribute. Look at that. So response message has no result attribute. Oh, there should be a result, not response. And same thing here. This is a result. Response message has a result attribute. Did I make that mistake over here? Result, 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 result. Everything looks all right. All right, try again. So init is okay. We log in. Nothing. What happened to login? Cliq count. And we set the Cliq count here. Why did that not do anything? I did press login, right? Let me check it again. Yeah. So I clicked on login. Let's go up here. And I got to read through this. We didn't get any of these alerts. Let's see if we're getting a success here. Let's see if we're coming through or not. Are we coming through here? Well, you know, we can test this without that. We can check to see, you know, let's check for failure. Let's check for failure. So this should be, you know, Alice X. Should show failure, bad username and password. Okay. But when we do a good login, we don't get that. So I'm sure we're entering this code. When we hit the button to log in, we're entering this code. So now we're passing Cliq count up to on login handler. So on login, remember on login got passed into the login form there. And here it is. We call this .set state Cliq count. We set it to Cliq count here. And this should be you know, a number, right? 0 or whatever the number is. Let's check that number. I'm going to log out first. Now we're going to log in. It's null. So Cliq count is coming out null. Why are we passing null in there? So this is coming up null. Response dot Cliq count is coming out null. And so let's check in here in the login. So select password, comma, Cliq count from users. I'll hold it right there. MySQL -u CSUSB DT -d React. MySQL. Did I type that in wrong? Yeah, I forgot the L, I guess. So describe the users. There is a Cliq count in there. So let's select star from users. They're zeros, right? They're good. They're zeros. So here we select Cliq count, and that's the name, isn't it? Cliq _ count. We select Cliq count. And we have the username here. The row is not 0 because we're not returning a failure. Here we're fetching the row. We pull out the password here. And then down here, we pull out Cliq count. Oh, that should be an underscore Cliq count. There we go. So there we go. So let's reload this. Log out. We're going to log in and log out. So it's fine. It's working. And now let's we need to display the Cliq count. So up here in this state, if the Cliq count is null, well, let me do it a little bit differently here. This now watch, when I'm logged in and I reload the app, I get the login form. And then I flick over to the logout form. So if you don't mind that flickering there, login form and then flick to here, this is good enough. But if you want to get rid of that flickering there, you need to have another state. So, you know, we need to have some sort of initializing state, like a loading state. So we would have, you know, loading. So first we're loading. And when we finish loading down here, this dot set state loading is false. We finish loading. Now we can have a loading screen. Let's do that. But actually here, when we're setting the state, I think we need to do, I think we need to put it in the other ones there. We'll stay in a permanent loading state. If there's an application error, we'll stay in a permanent loading state. Here, if there's an error, we'll stay in the loading state. And if we're logged in, we discover that we're logged in, then we can exit the loading state. And if we're not logged in, if we discover that, we can also exit the loading state. Whoops, making a mistake there. This is too much. Oops, what did I do? Cliq count is null. Loading is false. We're done loading. I guess, or you could call it initializing. Maybe that's easier to understand. Get initial state, initializing. Loading. What's a loading screen? So if we're loading, then we have to add that here. So if this dot state dot loading, so if we're loading, we're in this loading screen. So we'll return loading screen. Call it loading screen. And then else, if this dot state dot Cliq count is null, then we're not logged in. Otherwise, we are logged in. But here, I think I want to change this because this is the, well, all right, we can do it like this. We'll do it like this. Keep this alone. Keep that alone. We have a logout button, but then we need our Cliq button. This is the Cliq button. There it is. This has to be inside of a single div, by the way. There we go. That's important. Render functions in React need to return a single element, not a list. So we have to, if we want more than one element in there, we have to put them inside something like a div. So we want the Cliq button followed by the logout button. So we need to define this Cliq button class. And basically it's a render method, right? And the render method has it's return something, return div click here. We'll fix that later. It's just a stub. But we also need this render. What was it? The loading screen. And here we're going to return, just keep it simple, loading, ... That's good. So now we have that loading screen and we have this beginning of a Cliq button. And we did that down here. We added some extra logic. Let's see if that works. You see the loading? Click here. And then we have log out, log in, log out, log in. If we reload, we're going to see a loading screen. Here we go. That's nice. All right. So we need to implement this Cliq button. So let's, what does the Cliq button look like? It'll be something like, we'll make it a button from this input element. Input type equals submit, value equals, I think I was using apostrophes there. They're both okay. The value equals click me, something like that. And these should be self-closing. And then on click equals, and we have the click handler here, this dot on click. So we have an on click method there. On click is a function. We don't need to get the event. So we need to increment the clicks in the database. So we do something like add click here. I think I'll stop the video. So let me do it like this. I'll do it console console.log click button clicked, and so we can see that, and we're going to pass the information up to the parent who's maintaining that click count. So it'll be something, it'll have to pass it in as a property on, I'll say on click button, just on click button, on click count, on click button clicked. So we're going to say that the click button has been clicked. So it's on, that's click button, on click button. So this click button has to have an attribute called on click button. And that'll needs to run an event handler here on click button. Just give it the same name. So we can stick it here on click button function. And you know what we can do is we can do the same thing. This is right here. This init is gets the click count. Or we could just increase. We don't have to worry about verifying with the server what our clicks are. We just increment. We just increase the locally stored click count. Let's do that. This dot state dot click count. I'm sorry. This dot set state. We need to set the state, and the click count is going up. It's this dot state dot click count plus 1. Let's see if that works. Click me. Click button clicked. Because they're not displaying it right now. And if we reload here, everything is okay. Let's go ahead and display that that number. So it's where is that? Down here we have the click button. So we want to display the clicks. See, we're doing all this inside app. We could put it in a separate component. I guess we can do it here for now. So this will be like a div, and we're going to say clicks, and then we'll drop in a value there. The clicks will be this dot state dot click count. Call it click count. Well, that was pretty easy. Click count is 0. Now look at that. This is string concatenation. So the thing about it is the database. We have to hit the database. So I'm going to stop the video at this point, and we got to add one to the click count.